All right, before we begin, how many folks in here are React developers or have ever touched React before? Cool, that's awesome. Does anyone here work with WCAG or the area spec at all, implementing accessibility things? One, half, two, okay. Okay, that's cool. So yeah, hello everyone, my name is Scott Vinkle. I'm a front-end developer and accessibility advocate at Shopify. I'm also a Canada Learning Code chapter co-lead and the current A11yproject.com maintainer, which is a really great resource for all the things web accessibility, so check that out. And you can also find me on Twitter, GitHub, and pretty much everything else on the web at svinkle. So today I'm going to help answer the question, can React apps be made accessible? So it seems like there's a bit of a reserve or a hesitation when considering building apps with React. Oftentimes folks may feel like these types of apps are difficult or perhaps impossible to be made accessible by the very nature of them relying so heavily on JavaScript. So I'm here to answer this question today. And to answer the question, and why does he stop working? Why does this happen? Okay, hold on. Spoiler, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, this is a good cliffhanger.
It's going to be fine. It's totally fine. Yes. The answer is yes, folks. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. So yeah, React apps can absolutely be made accessible for people with disabilities. So today I'm going to share some tips that I found to help with this. So for the agenda today, we've got, I'll start with a few high-level notes when first getting started with React, just in case you haven't jumped on board yet. We'll look at how to set the page title. We'll review how to create a live announcements component. We'll explore how to manage keyboard focus between components and when loading pages. We'll take a brief look at React's accessibility linter, which comes with each new app. We'll spotlight a new feature with React Fragments. I'll share some thoughts on writing semantic HTML within React components. And finally, at the end, I'll go through a small demo app that I created to help illustrate each point. So, a few things to watch for when getting started. These took me a little bit by surprise, but it didn't take too long before I got used to it. And if you do make a mistake with writing something incorrectly, you'll get a friendly warning in your browser DevTools console with tips on how to fix the issue. So when it comes to writing HTML attributes in React components, they need to be written in camel case style. This means that when an attribute name is made up of two words, the second word in the attribute must start with a capital letter. So for example here, the attribute tab index needs to be written as tab index with a capital I. Content editable needs to be written as content editable with a capital E. And the last example, max length, needs to be written as max length with a capital L. And it's worth noting that the area and data attributes are exempt from this rule. And there are a few reserved word conflicts when it comes to writing HTML attributes in React components. For example here, the reserved word for is used in HTML when pairing a label with an input element. In JavaScript, for is used to loop through items using an index, although I guess we're moving away from that, so don't worry about it. So in this case, we need to write the attribute as HTML4. And the other example here is the reserved word class, which is used in HTML to allow CSS and JavaScript to select and access specific elements via the class selector. In JavaScript, it's used to create a class declaration. So when adding a class to an element, this needs to be written as class name. So in HTML5, there are a few elements which do not feature the closing tag. So just like back in the old XHTML days, if you remember that, JSX actually requires the self-closing elements to have the /. So for example, here there is the image, the meta, and the input elements. They all require the / once again in JSX. So let's take a look at setting the page title. So you might be wondering, why bother setting the page title at all? Who benefits from this? Well, there's a few reasons here. For one, it updates the content in the browser tab. So sighted users have a better understanding of where they are in the app. It helps to increase search engine optimization. So when something like Google comes through and indexes your site, it's got that information there. And the page title content is often the first bit of information that's announced by a screen reader. Folks who depend on assistive technology have a better understanding of where they are in the app as well. So how do we actually do this in React? Whoops. All right. Yeah. So the simplest method that I found to set the page title is just to use the document.title global property. So on the screen here is a function called component did mount. This is a React lifecycle method. The code within this function executes when the component is loaded onto the screen. And the single line within this function is using the document.title to set a string value of my page title. So when this component loads, the page title will be set to this value. And it's also worth noting that this is not specific or unique to React. Any JavaScript-based site or application can use this method. And I also felt like it would be worth mentioning a few other pre-existing components that other developers have made. These components can be included in your site or your app via NPM. So for example, here, the first one is called React Document Title. This can be used by wrapping your component with a document title component. Then you would add a title prop and set its value to the desired page title. And the other one here is called React Helmet and is used by creating a helmet component. And within this, you can set anything you'd like that would normally appear in the head section of a page. So for example, setting the character set, the page title, and maybe including a CSS-specific document. And it's also worth noting that the React Helmet component is created by the NFL. Any NFL fans here? I assume my new American friends will say yes to that, hopefully. No? Okay, cool. That's all right. Okay. I just lost my slide. What's the hotkey for that? Oh, there it is. I found it. Cool. It's all good. Let's take a look at a complete live announcements component. So sometimes when you're working with a single page app, you might request data from an external data source. And for people who rely on assistive technology, it's a good idea to announce when and if the data request was successful or not. And if it was successful, how many items are now being displayed on the screen. So let's take a look at a live announcements component. So here we have the announcements component in its entirety. And I do read off what's on the slide in case anyone listening to me right now can't see the screen. So this is why I'm reading everything out. So first thing is to import React from React. And then we create the class definition with class announcements extends react.component. Within the class, we have a single render method. And within that is a return statement. And this simply returns a div element. And the div element features the area live attribute with the value of polite, which means assistive technology will wait until other messages are finished loading or finished being announced. And then this content will be read aloud afterwards. The div also features the area atomic attribute, which ensures all content, not just the updated or changed content, will be announced. Within the div is a single line that reads this.props.message, and it's wrapped in the curly braces. This will output the message text when it's passed to the announcements component here. And then finally, we export the announcements component so that it can be used elsewhere in the app. So now that we have the component written and available, how do we actually use it? Well, to start, in a parent component, which we'll call the announcements component, we'll create a new state property. We'll call this property message and set its value to null for now. So on the screen here, there's a this.state object declaration, and inside the object is a property called message with its value set to null. Next, at the point where you receive your data, either successfully or if things didn't work out as expected, we'll set the content of the message property. To do so, you'll call the this.setState function, and pass in the object parameter. This object will feature the message property we created earlier with its value set to the string of text we want to announce. And lastly, we'll include this announcements component within the parent component. In order to send it the message text from state to the announcements component, we'll use a prop. And this prop on the screen here is called message, with its value being set to this.state.message. So when this component loads, the message will be announced by a screen reader, and the person using the app will be informed of the current state message. So like with setting the page title, there are a few existing components for creating live regions. For example, here there's one called React Area Live, and it requires a live announcer component to be added to your template. Then within this, there's a live message component, which takes the same message prop as described earlier, along with the Area Live attribute. Also within the live announcer component is your content that would be dynamically updated based on some event. And then the other component which I found when doing this research was one called React A11Y Announcer. And it's actually literally the exact same thing that I came up with as described earlier in the other slides. So those are both available for you to check out. All right. So moving on now to the concept of focus management. So well-planned focus management is actually critical when creating a successful and comfortable user experience, especially for highly dynamic or single-page apps. So what I mean by this is when moving the keyword focus cursor from one place to another in order to assist the person on the other side of the screen with moving along with the intended flow of your app. So let's take a look at a few examples here. So the first thing we need to do is select an element to send focus to. So how do we actually do this in React? Well, it can be kind of helpful to think about how you might be used to selecting something maybe within jQuery back in the day. So on the screen here is an example of the jQuery $selector caching a reference to the loading message element in a variable called loading message. Somewhere else in the app, we could use the variable and call its focus method to set the keyboard cursor directly onto this element. So in React, the concept's pretty much the same, but how we arrive there is a little bit different. In order to select an element the React way, quote unquote, we create what's called a function ref, or just a ref for short. So the ref is a prop that is set on the element we want to reference elsewhere in the component. It allows us to select and reference in React an actual DOM node on the page. So for example, what's on the screen here is a plain div element, and within the div is the phrase loading. So this is meant to be displayed when an app is in some sort of loading state. The div features a prop called ref, and this ref is being assigned a regular ES6 style function. The function is being passed a parameter called loading message, and within this function is a single assignment statement of this.loadingMessage equals loading message. This sets the ref of the div to the class property this.loadingMessage. So now we have that available to use and reference later. So how do we actually use this? So in order to use the ref, we can use the component did mount lifecycle method once again, and then call the focus method on the ref element. So when this component loads, the keyword focus indicator will be sent automatically to the div element, which will then announce its text content of loading. So here's another pretty important example of focus management, which is adjusting keyword focus when moving from page to page within React. So you might be asking, why do we need to bother doing this at all? Well, for one, when using React Router's link component, new pages are inserted into the DOM, into React's virtual DOM without reloading the browser. So as a result, pages are perceived to be loaded very quickly, but people who depend on assistive technology, such as a screen reader, may be left in an, excuse me, in an unpredictable state. So how do we overcome this issue? So coming back to the ref concept, one path we can take to resolve this is to create a ref on the outermost container element and use that ref to shift focus to the page. So the idea here is when the new page loads into view, focus is sent to the top of the page, and from there, a user can navigate forward from this point, discovering content in the same manner as if a full page reload had taken place. So for example, here what's on the screen is there's a new wrapper div element, which holds all of the page content, including the header and footer, etc. On the div, there's a ref with its function assignment. And with this function, we're passing in the parameter content container and assigning it to the class property this.contentContainer. Also in the div is a tab index attribute with its value set to -1. This ensures that the div itself will be able to programmatically receive focus, but will not be added to the natural focus order. And the other attribute on the div is area labeled by, with its value being set to the ID of the page heading. This helps to give extra context of where the user currently is by announcing the page heading content when the div receives focus. So, how do we use this ref? Well, again, we can call the ref within the component did mount lifecycle. So to iterate, when the page loads, the keyboard focus indicator will be sent to the container div of the page, and then the user can continue on with content discovery from that point. So something new here. So after learning about how to create a ref using the function syntax, if it's a little confusing for you, don't worry about it. It's confusing for me too sometimes. There's actually a brand new way to create a ref, which is, my notes say here is coming in React 16.3, but that was released, what, a week ago? Something like that? Anyway, so let's take a look at an example of this. So coming back to the loading component example, the snippet of code on the screen here gives a general outline of the new ref syntax. And the first part to this is to create a class property, and displayed here is an assignment statement which reads loading equals react.createRef. This creates a new class property called loading and creates a new ref object for use later in the component. So now that we have our ref object created, the next step is to assign the ref to an element using the ref prop. So on the screen is a div element with its ref prop being assigned this.loading. At this point, the loading class property we created in the first step now references the div on our render method. And finally, the last step is to actually use the loading class property. And with this example of sending focus to the div when the component loads, we can add a single line of code within the loading component's component mount method. The line reads this.loading.value.focus. So with this, the focus would be sent to the div when the component loads on the screen. So you may have noticed that the value node on the last line there, this represents the actual element which has been assigned to the ref object. In this example, it represents the actual div element. So with this in mind, you might imagine what we need to do in order to get the current value of an input element, for example. And it looks something like this.refName.value.value. So that may look a little odd, but it's just the way it works. So let's talk about another new-ish feature that was released with React 16.2, Fragment Components. So what are Fragment Components and why should we use them? And also, how do they help with the accessibility of our apps? So let's answer this. So first of all, what are fragments? Fragments actually let you group a list of elements or child components together without adding extra nodes to the DOM. So since React component templates must be wrapped with an element in order to be returned within the render method, oftentimes developers might just wrap all their code with a div. So this works just fine, but if you're not careful, this may lead to some invalid HTML. So with fragments, we can now wrap templates with a fragment element. When this component is rendered, the fragment element itself is not sent to the DOM, rendering only the HTML required to properly output your content. So for example, the code snippet on the screen here features a render method with a return statement. Within this div is a div element which is wrapping some table cell or a TD element with the word hello in one and world in the other. So it's safe to say that this class, this component rather, is probably meant to be a child component of some other data table. So wrapping the template code with a div like this is quite common, but if you were to wrap the table content with a div element here, it actually results in invalid HTML. So general note, divs are not valid child elements of table rows. So how do we get around this? How do we meet React's requirement of wrapping content with a single element without generating invalid HTML? Any guesses? Fragments. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, you guessed it, the fragment. So now the code snippet on the screen features the fragment element, which is wrapping the TD element table cells. So this we can check out the generated markup. And here's the result, and it looks a lot better. It's much cleaner. Semantic HTML is being generated, and there's no extra element wrappers being sent to the browser, which is really nice. So I feel it's worth mentioning that there is another way of creating fragment elements. Basically, you just remove the react.fragment string from within the beginning and the end fragment tag and leave the angle brackets behind. So this syntax is specific to JSX and is meant to be a quicker and more convenient way of creating fragments. So there may be issues when using this when your editor or other tool like linters or formatters don't know about this syntax just yet. So it's recommended to make sure you have the latest versions of your editor and any related tooling to provide the necessary support for this new syntax style. Okay, so this is pretty neat. React actually has an accessibility linter which comes prepackaged with each app. As a general note, a code linter is a handy tool which helps to ensure clean code or code standards as determined by the team or an individual. So in other words, they let you know when something's not quite right. So let's take a look at a few ways we can use the linter to help ensure a more accessible React app. So the linter in question here is called ESLint plugin JSX A11Y. And again, it comes with each app created with the Create React App utility. And by default, without any setup or configuration on your part, the linter outputs errors found to the browser DevTools console. So for example, on the screen here, there's an image element with a valid source attribute, but it's missing its alt attribute. So does anyone know what happens when a screen reader comes into contact with an image with no alt attribute available? Any guesses?
Did it just say image? Reads the URL?
Kind of. Yeah, that's right. So it actually reads out the URL, the source value, right? So in this specific with this example here, Chrome console.ping, it's not too bad, but you can imagine if there's some sort of giant hash that's being added to the image file name, it's super annoying and not useful at all. So below this is a screenshot of the Chrome DevTools console with the output. Image elements must have an alt prop, either with meaningful text or an empty string for decorative images. So outputting the, errors to the console like this is pretty helpful, but I think it would be even better if these errors were displayed in my editor while I was writing code. So on the screen here is a screenshot of my Atom editor outputting an accessibility error with my code. It's the same error as in the console in the previous slide. So let's see how we can set this up. So first you need to install the ESLint plugin for your editor. This is usually done within the editor as part of the package manager. So I've got a few links here to some of the more popular editors these days, and the names of the plugins include linter-ESLint for Atom, Sublime linter -contrib -eslint for Sublime text, and eslint for VS Code. And then next, you want to install eslint and the eslint plugin JSX A11Y packages from npm. You would accomplish this by opening up your terminal application, changing to your app directory, and then typing npm install eslint -plugin -jsx -a11y -save -dev. So this command will install these utilities only for your current project, as each project you work on could have a different configuration. And the last thing to do is to update or create, if it doesn't exist, your project's eslint.rc file. So in the plugin section of this file, you'd add jsx-a11y, and this loads the accessibility plugin for use with your editor's eslint plugin. And in the extend section of this file, you would add plugin :jsx-a11y / and this loads the default set of rules to test your code against, and I think they're pretty good. So after all this is done, you'd restart your editor, and you should see some errors come up when you've got some accessibility issues in your code. I think it's pretty awesome. So the last thing here I wanted to discuss is writing HTML in React. So in the past, I've been asked the very open-ended and broad question, how accessible is React? So this was coming from the knowledge that other frameworks or libraries have had some pretty rough goes when it comes to accessibility as a result of the framework team providing third-party user interfaces or components. So in other words, if something wasn't accessible, there's not a great chance of it actually getting fixed as it relied on a third-party team. So on the slide here is a relevant quote from Hayden Pickering. He's a cool guy. And it reads, "React code doesn't have to be inaccessible any more than hip-hop has to be misogynist." So I believe this is actually pretty true, and it's a nice segue to my next point. So what I found is that since React uses ES6 classes and standard HTML markup within its templates, it's really up to you, the developer, to continue to write valid semantic HTML. With the exception of using third-party modules, maybe from npm, again, it's really up to you. React itself, the library, doesn't force you to use something that someone else created. So this lowers the risk of creating an inaccessible product. So in other words, if there are any accessibility issues, it's your fault. I think it's a really good thing, actually. So again, it's up to you as the developer to fix these issues. You don't have to wait for a third-party developer group to maybe get around to fixing these issues someday. You can do it yourself today, right now, hopefully yesterday. Okay, cool. So I'm going to load up my demo, and so what I like to do is go through it 3 times. Once with my mouse, another time with just my keyboard, and then after that I'll fire up VoiceOver screen reader that comes with each Mac and iOS device, and we'll see how things go with that. Okay. So here, I see here on the screen there's some sort of app or a site that says TVDB, and then there's a heading that says search TVDB for your favorite TV shows. Okay, I guess this is an input. Yeah, when I click on this, I can see there's an input, and then beside that, I guess, is a button that says make it so. That's kind of an odd label for button. I don't know who created this thing, but anyway, let's keep going. The next heading says check out what we're watching. Okay, so I see some cover art for some shows here. When I put my mouse cursor over it, it changes to the little hand. So I guess these are links. And we're at the bottom. Oh, yeah, I made it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I think what I want to do is try a search. This is one of my favorites when I was a kid. See what happens with this, Star Trek. I guess that was the loading screen. Okay, so it says search results for Star Trek, and I see a bunch here. I'm looking for my fave. Ooh, Next Generation. So good. Okay, cool. So it says Star Trek Next Generation. There's a summary, a bunch of text here. Below that, there's a details table. It says genre, adventure, science fiction, type is scripted, and the rating is 8.8. I think that's pretty good. And then below that, there's another heading that says more info with a couple links here. I guess this goes to IMDb, and then the one below that says something about find out what YouTube has available for Star Trek. Okay. And we're at the end of the app already. I guess I'll click on this thing, see what happens. It takes me back to the home page. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to try and go through it with just the keyboard. Starting at the very top here, there's a nice blue border that I see so I know where I'm at. Okay. Come down here, I guess I'm on the input, and there's the button again. I'll keep on cruising. I can see where I'm at by going through, and each of these links has a nice blue outline. That's nice. I think what I'll do is, let's click enter on The Simpsons here. It's a great show. Simpsons, there's a summary, details again. These links are here. 8.4 out of 10. That's not too bad. I know Brandon will agree with me. It's a good show.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Yeah, we should rewrite this app, right? Okay. I guess that works pretty well. We were able to get through this with just the keyboard, and we could see where we're at. So I'm going to fire up VoiceOver and see what happens next.
VoiceOver on Safari, TVEV window as keyboard focus. Banner. Visit link, TVEV, end of banner. Main. Heading level 1, 3 items. Search, TVEV, for your favorite TV shows.
Okay.
Search. Your favorite show. Your favorite show. Search text field.
Oh, it's an input. Okay, that's good.
Make it so button.
I guess that's the submit button.
End
Let's
of
see what else
search.
there is.
Heading level 2. Check out what we're watching. Link image. The Office.
That's a good show.
Link image. That 70s show. Link image. Friends. Link image. Game of Thrones.
Okay, I guess there's a bunch of images there with
Link
their
image.
links.
The Walking Dead.
I'm going to try and do a search.
Link. Heading level 2. Check end of search. Make it so button. Your favorite show. Search text field.
So what's a good TV show these days that people are watching? I don't even know. I don't watch a lot of TV. But what is it? Okay. How do I?
BROKLYN.
Two N?
Misspelled.
No. What?
Make it so button. Miss N.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and look.
State not 1.
Like that?
911.
Oh, sorry.
9.
Let's see what happens.
Button. Loading. Total results found 1.
Okay.
Banner. Visit link. TVEV end of banner. Total results found 1. Main. Heading level 1, 3 items. Search results for Broccoli 99.
Nice.
Link image. Brooklyn 99.
That's the only one, right?
End of main.
Yeah, okay.
Link image. Brooklyn 99.
Let's try it.
Loading. Group Brooklyn 99 group.
Okay. I guess I'm on the page.
Banner. Visit link. TVEV end of banner. Main. Heading level 1. Brooklyn 99. Heading level 2. Summary.
Okay.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine is an ensemble comedy about a talented but carefree detective, the Book police captain, and their precinct colleagues. While based in the workplace, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is not really about the job. It's about the men and women behind the badge.
All right, well, I'm intrigued. I'm going to go home and watch this now.
Heading level 2. Details. Table 2 columns, 4 rows. Genre. Column 1 of 2. List genre 3 items. Column 2 of 2. Bullet. Comedy. 1 of 3.
Nice.
Bullet. Crime. 3 of 3.
Ooh, crime and comedy.
End of list. Row 2 of 4 genre. Scripted. Row 3 of 4 genre. Network.
Yeah.
FOX. United States. Column 2 of 2.
Fox,
Row 4 of 4
right.
genre. 8.3. Column 2 of 2.
Oh.
Out of 10.
Was it 8.3?
Out of 8.3.
Okay.
Out of 10.
Out of 10. That's pretty good. That's not too bad.
End of table. Heading level 2. More info.
Okay.
List 2 items. Bullet 1 of 2. Link. Check out Brooklyn Nine-Nine on IMDb. Opens third-party website and new window.
Okay, that's good information though. In case I don't want to open it right now, I can do it later.
Bullet 2 of 2. Link. Find out what YouTube has available for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Opens third-party website and new window.
Sweet. That sounds like a good show. Okay. Oops.
VoiceOver off.
Okay, cool. That sounded like it was pretty good to me. I was able to get through the homepage, do a search, and I found out there's only one instance of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I wasn't expecting, but you'd be surprised what you can come up with on this site. So yeah. So a bit of highlights here. What we witnessed in the demo is you may have noticed, hopefully, that the page title was being updated as I was navigating around. When the loading screen appeared, the message loading was announced. When the search was complete, the number of items available was also announced. When the new page loaded, the keyboard focus started from the top of the page, allowing the user to navigate forward to discover content in a natural way. And when using the keyboard alone, there was a nice visible blue outline on each focusable element, which lets the user know exactly where they are in the app. So I kind of feel like if you're following these tips, it really increased the accessibility of your app. And I really believe this is a good thing to do to build that level of confidence with your users, with your brands, and also just to achieve equality in what we're building every day. I think it's really important. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.